And this is where they end up, in one of these camps. For the Muslims, the middle way, when we look, all of this information that has come out has only confirmed what people believed on good faith from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 1400 years. I mean, really our iman should be increased in this age, but unfortunately we have become an ummah that doesn't read. We choose to watch videos, and we become an ummah of listening and not reading, right? The first revelation is Iqra. It wasn't Isma'. Isma' means listen. It was not Isma', it was Iqra. And this is something that the Muslim, we've left this type of knowledge. We just listen by word of mouth. We become word of mouth. Things coming around. Did you hear so-and-so? And did you hear this and that? But once you read and investigate at what their own scholars have arrived at, which we should have been doing this research ourselves, but we don't have scholars that study these things. Go into engineering instead of other sciences. And these social sciences and humanities are extremely important, but unfortunately we place no emphasis whatsoever on comparative religion. There's Muslims that condemn comparative religion and use hadith of the Prophet forbidding Umar radiallahu anhu to study the Torah, because it wasn't Umar's business to study the Torah. You see, I mean, they were at a point when they were having direct revelation from Allah, and the Prophet was alive, confronting these people as a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah said, جَادِرْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And the later ulama, including Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, Ibn Taymiyyah has a huge volume work in which he refutes the Christians completely from their own books. He studied the Torah and the Injil and chose completely. It's 8 volumes. It is extraordinary work. So the Muslims did do investigation in comparative religion, but unfortunately most Muslims completely avoid it. And this is a golden opportunity now, because they have literally dismantled, deconstructed their religion, and they can't do it to the Quran. All they've attempted to do it is with the Hadith. They can't do it with the Quran, so they attempt to do it with the Hadith, to deconstruct the Hadith, which is an easier target, because the Hadith there are all types of Hadith, and there were liars, and there were wadi'een, people that made up Hadith and things like this. But the Hadith is preserved, it's very exact science. So, get the God and take it back to Kaaba. Right? And this is what they would do. It's like in China to this day, the Chinese worship gods in their villages. And if the village starts doing poor economically, they'll go look for a village that's doing well economically, and they'll throw away the gods that aren't benefiting them, and they'll bring the gods from the village that's doing well economically. It's a very pragmatic type of idolatry. So this is what these people were doing. They were worshiping all of these idols. And the Mithraic teaching the Mithraic God was born on December 25th. This is in their own, the research that had been done. Born on the December 25th, he was called Sol Invictus, the conquering sun god. The sun god. And this is why Christians worship on Sunday, not S-O-N, S-U-N. It's not the Son of God. It's Sunday, the day of Sol, the day of the Sun God. And this is important, and it's going to be connected with the idea of the Masih ad-Dajjal, because the Masih ad-Dajjal is also a Sun God. The Sun God, they believed, was the giver of life. In the same way the sun gives life to plants through photosynthesis, as we know in biology now. They believed that the sun god would also give life after death. People would die, they would be resurrected. In the same way that Mithra, who kills himself, he does an act of self-immolation and kills himself for the sins of mankind. He becomes a scapegoat. This is Mithra's act. He had 12 disciples. The disciples represented the 12 zodiacal constellations, right? There are 12, in horoscope, which we do not believe in. But the Mithras believed in these 12 zodiacal constellations, and each one of them represented a disciple. There is no number given of the Hawariyun. There's no number that says they were 12 in the Islamic tradition. And Jesus, quote unquote, making 13, which is what the Christians call the devil's number. Very interesting. I mean, they're so superstitious, they don't even have a 13th floor. I don't know if they do that here, but in the United States, you go from 12 to 14 in a building. They don't have a 13th floor. So this is their number. They call that the devil's number, 13. And this is the number of Mithra and his disciples. Now what happens with Mithra, Paul literally takes the Mithraic teaching and embellishes it with aspects of the Christian teaching. In the Roman Empire is where the Vatican now stands. This is historical evidence. It is where the Vatican now stands. The mother of Mithra was worshipped. The mother of Mithra was worshipped. So this was all part of this redaction of the Judaic teaching. The Semitic Christianity becomes this Mithraic reality, completely transformed, completely altered until it is unrecognizable. St. Augustine and the Christians were so bothered by the similarities between Christianity and Mithraism that they would not mention Mithraism by its name. They called Mithra the fellow in the cap, the Phrygian cap. They wouldn't even mention him by his name. And St. Augustine says in his writings that he met a priest from the fellow in the cap. And he said to St. Augustine, you know, our man is a Christian also. In other words, it's really the same teaching and doctrine. The Christians completely wiped out the books, the temples. All of the evidence of Mithraism was completely wiped out. And that's why it's only recently, in the last 100 years, that scholars, anthropologists, and archaeologists have been digging up all of this stuff and finding out about this teaching. Extraordinary. You find Mithraic pictures that resemble the Greek pictures of Christ that were used as icons by the Orthodox Church. Now, the very interesting thing about modern Christianity, and they've had a problem with this since the 19th century, really since the beginning of the Enlightenment, because it's a very irrational religion and has many elements that they're no longer acceptable by their own logic, by their own evolution in their philosophies and different things, which led to their atheism, which led to their rejection. Their own intellectuals have rejected Christianity. But the Mithraic influence on this country has been so great on the United States, on Great Britain, and on the European nations. The United States took as their symbols many of the Mithraic symbols. It's fascinating. If you study these things, you find that the Mithraism, the mystery religion of Mithraism, actually shows up constantly, again and again, in the symbols of Western civilization. The cross is obviously the most dominant one, which is a sword. And because it was a religion of warriors, quite literally warriors, the Mithraists had to be warriors. They were warriors of God, their God. And this is the dialogue that Paul introduces into Christianity, which you don't find in the Gospels. You find these in the Acts and the epistles and the Corinthians and the later, what they call not from the four Gospels, but the second part of the New Testament. Now, the second word here in the Masih ad-Dajjal is called Dajjal, which in Arabic means imposter. The Arabs say Dajjal, and they use it to mean not like a Dajjal like the Masih ad-Dajjal. They'll just say Huwa Dajjal. Like Imam Malik, he was asked about a certain muhaddith, and he said Huwa Dajjalun min ad-Dajjajila. He's a Dajjal he's an imposter from the imposters. And this is how it's used, the idea of an imposter. So Masih ad-Dajjal is literally an imposter, Christ. Now, if you look at the root word, because Arabic has root words, and the root words have primal meanings which indicate where the semantic field is deriving its meaning from. The word Dajjala was a word that the Arabs used when a camel had mange. When it was diseased, they would put pitch over it as a treatment. They would put pitch, and they use that word yudajjilu. They would put this pitch over the camel so you didn't see the disease of the camel. Outwardly, the camel would look good because it's been pitched over. You got that idea? This is the Dajjal is he pitches over the sickness and the disease and makes diseases look good.